Almost there.
We're almost there.
Okay, so Temple of Doom. This is Michael. We hate him. No, it's a bad summary of what I said the last time. Yeah, no. Michael might start showing up unless he hates this. So we'll see how it goes. Real quick, let's read the plot in case you haven't seen it or you. It's been a while. So basically, Lao Che attempts to rip off Indy 1 year before the start of Raiders of the Lost Ark. He's poisoned and has to chase around the antidote. He and his singer get away, so they think, but they're right in where Lao Che wants them in one of his freight planes. Pilots abandon the plane after dumping fuel. No parachutes on board. Indy, Shorty, and Willie reach the ground using a life raft. They're now in the middle of an Indian village whose town rock and children have gone missing. Indy takes the liberty of enlisting himself, Willie, and Shorty for the job. They find the palace where these shenanigans are going down. Dinner of odd dishes, snake surprise, monkey brains, etc. Willie and Indy almost hook up, but their egos get in the way. Failed assassination attempt on Indy. He feels up a statue in Willie's room. Time for a new adventure. They almost get crushed because Willie doesn't understand the word hurry. Onto the Temple of Doom. Watch sacrificial ceremony. Everyone gets taken captive. Indy is forced to drink the Kool-Aid. Shorty escapes child slavery. Willie is next up to be sacrificed. Shorty snaps Indy out of it. Saves everyone, including the enslaved children and the town rock. Minecart chase, final standoff on the bridge. They go for a ride, return the village rock and children. The end. Jason, what'd you like about this movie? As if you hadn't already said it.
These are the first words I've ever said about this. So I really did enjoy some of the kind of set pieces involved with this. So we start off with kind of this cool sequence of like a bunch of these like Chinese people in this room. And then there's this big-ass stage that we're supposed to believe that everyone was able to view in on, where it's just all these people dancing, tap dancing and stuff around it, while Willie is our, front girl, kind of singing around it. The scene overall doesn't really make sense how through this little viewport that we end up seeing, that everyone kind of emerges out of, that we saw all these people dancing and tap dancing and that it meant anything. But it's kind of neat overall. So that room in general is pretty cool. It kind of sets, a tone and vibe for at least where the rest of the scene goes. And then once we get to the, village after the plane crash, it's this worn down, like dilapidated town. We really harp on the fact that like the food that's being provided to Indy and Willie and the rest of them is more food than what a person eats in a week. So we're really kind of tone setting just the state of this village and kind of how things are. Throughout that, once we get to Pankot Palace, there's just these really awesome backdrops. We get kind of like a throne room. We get kind of the dining room, this grand dining hall. That's really cool. These bedrooms are really elaborate. And then once we kind of get down through into like the Temple of Doom, through like the secret passageways, there's all these torches. There's all of these, kind of like statues and figurines and stuff. It's just all of these really cool and kind of intricate set pieces, I think, that really kind of help pull me along through the story, because we start off with a heavy action sequence and then we get kind of a lull if you want to ignore, the plane crash and the raft as an action sequence.
There's a lull if you ignore the movie.
Yeah. So we get a big lull between that and then, kind of coming up through, up to Pankot Palace. We get the assassination attempt, a little bit of a lull, and then we're in the Temple of Doom. It just felt like there were kind of these gaps, but like the set pieces and some of the tone that was being set in those set pieces, I think is one of the few things that does carry through pretty heavily. Overall, kind of the darker vibe that also goes throughout this, as far as kind of summoning like an evil deity to conquer the world too, is our main purpose for being here. And I do think, some of those darker tones are really fun to explore in this type of movie.
Yeah. What'd you like, Mike?
I obviously agree with all that.
Very good.
Yeah.
We'd almost have to fight.
Yeah.
End of podcast. Thanks for listening, guys.
Hey, everybody. Good night.
Goes without saying, I agree with everything you say.
Well, as far as that, yes. It felt like a big budget practical effects 80s blockbuster movie. And it like vintage. Watching it today, it felt vintage, like fantastic. I loved every bit of it. It felt really good watching it. With that said, besides like all the practical effects, there was enough corny bits and enough stuff now that you watch it current day where you can pick things out that are like, well, they did that with this special effects, or they tried to achieve that with this special effects. And you pick it out, and it's the whole film still feels great, even though you have those small intricacies of like, this is kind of shit, but I love it.
I'm going to make a comment right now.
Yeah.
I do not think this movie would have been as good if Short Round was not there to make his kind of comedic reliefs and hold it down.
So, adding on to that, I loved the fact that Indy had a sidekick in this one.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
He does well. We got a little bit of the illusion, I think, in Raiders of the Lost Ark with Satipa, might have been his name.
Sala.
Well, no, in the very beginning. Like that first dude he kind of went with, where it's like you kind of have that compatriot who goes through you with on journeys and stuff. I think his name was like Satipa or something.
Okay.
And he ended up betraying him.
We'll just call him Traitor.
And then dying, right?
Who was in Raiders? Who was the guy who drove the plane?
Mac.
I think. Maybe Mac could have been like potentially at the first movie.
Yeah.
But then he doesn't show up at all.
Yeah. So I just think with the type of character that Indy
Jock.
is.
It's Jock.
Yeah.
Jock, start the plane.
Yeah.
Start the plane, Jock.
Yeah, because he's just out there fishing and stuff. But
he's like, I got a fish. He's like,
start the plane, Jock.
He's trying to make the judgment call. He hesitated. He's like, I could catch this fish, but
yeah. I thought having the sidekick in this one made a very good push for a lot of stuff. I thought the actual history of this, of like, it's in India and the British rule is still kind of there, and so they hit on that a little bit. I thought the history part of it was pretty cool. The fact that it's like the 80s and no one knows essentially India because we're all in America.
Sure.
And it was like, it's exotic and it's this and it's that. And it's just like, vampire bats. And you're like, that's kind of cool.
Well, that's kind of a thing for the time, is because everything is so exotic, because we don't really have that information portal for us to go and learn about India, is kind of why things can be so grossly misinterpreted from other people's cultures, and why that kind of does damage when you look back at it from a generation of now. Internet culture to where you can go look up and see what those cultures actually were like. Part of that doesn't translate as well, but at the time, a lot of that was kind of best effort, and you had to make generalizations to create a narrative. So it was understandable and acceptable, very much so at that time. But
it made good movie making back in the time,
for sure.
Yeah. Besides that, you kind of harped on a little bit with like the actual scenery and the shots, and yes, you can tell there's some special features, but a lot of it is practical effects, and a lot of it is well done and money put into and time put into good scenery and good, like you talked about, like the palace, and in the beginning when they walk in, it looks great. In the throne room and in the dinner sequence and in all their rooms, it looks great.
I love practical effects stuff like that. Just bothering to decorate and like really set a room, especially one that you're going to spend some time in. Yeah, I think is like the most worthwhile thing, and I love stuff like that so much, especially out of these like 70s, 80s, 90s movies where the CG, the computer generated graphics just aren't really there. The technology just isn't quite there yet. The practical effects that get to be done in them are just that much more meaningful. Yeah, it's so good.
Yeah. And one of my favorite movies is The Goonies, and this felt a lot like The Goonies and a lot of those like practical effects and stuff like that. And I'll say, like, and we'll get more into it, but like the scene where you first get into like the dungeons and you first get into like the kids digging, and you see it and you're like, okay, it's a big shot, it's a wide shot, and it's sparks flying this way, steam flying this way, running water, it's dark, it's rocks, it's a lot of people in one shot, and you're like, I don't want to say it this way, but it feels good. Like it gives you a lot to look at, and it gives you a lot to take in and like think about. Yeah. And so it felt really cool.
Well, I think a set piece does its best work when you can look at just like a singular frame and understand what it's implying. Yeah. And kind of what comes from it. And I feel like that's what a lot of these set pieces did a good job at, is kind of implying the context throughout those.
Yeah. And I told you running up on it, like Temple of Doom was my least favorite of the indies. And after watching it again this time, I was like, I kind of judged it pretty harshly. I like it more than I thought I did. And it was just one of those things that I came out on the other side really appreciating it and liking it more than I thought I did originally. So I liked it overall, obviously. Yes, there's some negatives, but I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, so I was telling you it might be my favorite Indy. And which is ironic to me because of this piece of information. So Spielberg and Lucas in interviews for the special features both referred back to the Star Wars trilogy and how the middle movie, Empire Strikes Back, which is my favorite Star Wars movie, was like the darker movie. It was the dip in the middle of the trilogy. And so, they were referring to this, like this should be like the darker of the three, which again, like I didn't know it was such like a big intention. I think I said this on the Raiders podcast. Like I did not know there was such a big intention that this was going to be a trilogy. But so I just found it interesting, like because I'm pretty sure this is my favorite of these Indy movies, and then the fact that like, oh yeah, we're following the same formula as with Star Wars, like the New Hope thing. A little darker movie, The Empire Strikes Back. Oh no, evil might have the upper hand here, and then then the end resolution, right, with Crusade or Last Jedi, or Return of the Jedi. Yeah, goddamn new trilogy fucking me up.
Return of the Skywalker.
Yeah.
Return of the Last Jedi, Skywalker.
The Last Skywalker wakes up. So anyway, similar to Empire. Just the similarities to Empire with this movie, though, is it just throws you right in. One of my favorite things about Empire Strikes Back is the fact that you're just like, boom, you're in the movie. Yeah. Like, things are happening. Yeah. Luke's getting taken by fucking whatever that thing's called. It's the Yeti, for lack of a better term.
It's a bold move to imply that everyone who's watching this has seen the first one and kind of has that, reference context.
Right.
But, like, it works out, right?
Mm-hmm.
With that said, you might not have to watch the first one to understand it because you jump right in.
Because it is before.
It is technically that prequel because this is 1935, right?
Yeah, Shanghai 1935. Picture it.
Picture it. Come on, bro.
Would you just?
But I don't know. So that's exactly how I felt like they handled this movie is like, yes, we got to watch Willie Scott do her little dance routine and sing or whatever, but then we're right in it. Like he's in a deal. He's Lao Che and his goons are trying to rip him off with the diamond and everything. Then big scene. Cartier's like, okay, now we're fucking falling out of a plane, and then we're in India and we get a little exposition, and then we're going into the temple. Like I feel like you just hit the treadmill at fucking, it was already on. You had to just like, jump on.
You catch up.
So I don't know. Like I like when a movie happens like that, and that was definitely my like.
I liked in this one that, so in the first one, they approached him. They were like, hey, the Nazis are looking for this. We need to try to find it before that. This one was like, hey, he's already doing something, Lao Che. Again, the fucking plane goes down. They fucking take a raft 1,000 feet down, whatever. But they end up, and it's like, hey, we need to go to Delhi. And the priest is like, you're going to help us out first. And it's like accidentally he falls into this one instead of like, you need to do this. This is going to be what's going on. Beat the Nazis, blah, 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 blah. It's like, instead it's like, hey, show some compassion, help us out, do the right thing. And it's like, of course, our hero, our guy is like, I got this.
Yeah. Well, it's a little bit of like journey versus destination kind of thing there too, right? So like in the first one, it was very clear, like, hey, like you have to get here and then figure it out. And like that's where the rest of the plot kind of comes from. But in this one, it's like you were already kind of doing something and then you got wrapped up in this. So especially just because it was Indy making his own calls, I guess, into being interested in this adventure and bothering to put forth the effort to save this village rather than just, they could have not given a single shit about this village that all these kids got kidnapped from.
Yeah.
And went back to Delhi. Willie moves on her own life and, Indy goes home.
I'm going back to Missouri.
It was 100% an option, but it just, the character that they built Indy out to be is someone who actually cares about, the people around him, and is also interested in the implications of, the history and the archaeological stuff that's involved. So
yeah,
it was really fun around that.
It makes you love him a lot more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because he's the guy who made a judgment call rather than just a guy who said it's not my problem.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I don't have a lot of dislikes. I wouldn't say really had any other than we get introduced to Shorty apparently a year before Raiders of the Lost Ark, and then where the fuck is he? We never see him again.
Yeah.
Foster care, is Willie taking care of him? What's going on? That irritates me. But other than that, I know that this, again, if you point out the unrealistic stuff, which is too many to name with this one.
About 69% of the entire movie.
Yeah. It's a little too much. But that, again, I feel like you enter into a movie like this, you're not going to sit there and complain about well, this was a little ridiculous and so was that.
Yeah.
I have some holes later, but, not a lot because I don't dwell on the small stuff,
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, I feel as far as the dislikes, it's just kind of the get on with it part of the story in general. So it's we get the introduction with Willie, which is kind of neat and feels meaningful, but all of that conflict is just a way to get Indy and Willie in a room together to care about each other and get the rest of the plot onto what we actually care about. So again, I draw some of the parallel stuff to Bond again with this movie. It's because our first sequence isn't directly relevant to the rest of the narrative. And while it kind of sets us up, I think, for, a little bit of some of that tone setting, a little bit of that perspective, our first, 15 minutes of, 22 minutes, somewhere in that range, is Indy showing up at a thing, already on a mission. He happens to be involved with, Willie. They happen to make it out together and then, just adopts them into their mission family. And then they just write it out until the end of it. And that's very nice and pretty inconvenient.
Yes.
But as far as wow, we sure took a long time to get to the actual plot of this core movie rather than just the happenstance that everybody gets to meet each other. Yeah. It just felt kind of odd, so...
Yeah. I just like that because you're just meeting the hero where he already is. He's not, his intention is not to save more people.
Right.
But,
come whatever may, he might.
Yeah, the plane crashed, now he's here, and he's just fuck, okay. Fine.
Well, it's you already love the character if you've seen the series, and let's get you back into loving the character. And let's just push this tiny narrative because it just gets you and it draws you and it does it. Like you said, bang, we're right in the middle of it. Let's do some stuff. Let's figure this out. And then it's the first 15 minutes are in that club and then they're escaping and you meet Short Round and then that girl, for whatever fucking reason, Willie's I'll go with you. Instead of just getting out and hey, there's a plane here. We're going to go on this. And she's, instead of being I love Bangkok. I have a great life.
Wait a second. I live in China. Why am I on the plane?
I've got a house. I've got house plants and shit.
I go to parties.
Yeah.
I have a lot of rent coming out in a couple days.
Yeah, and so you're kind of it's somewhat believable, I guess, because she sees guys with guns going after him. She is with him. Maybe it pushes that plot line along. That's fine. My biggest thing with this was they played up Willie being the damsel in distress so hard in this.
I'm going to complain about Willie so goddamn much in this.
Dude, it's terrible. Where you even already said a little bit about it where it was hey, we went into the room of death. It's closing on us. We're going to fucking die. Hurry up. Help us out. And she's
there's a bug!
But even before that, it was well, I got to put my night jacket on, and I got to make sure it's tied.
No sense of urgency
and I
with
gotta
this
walk.
one.
And, they really build that up of, Indy, oh, my God, what are we going to do?
There's 2 dead people in here. There's going to be 2 dead people in here.
Yeah. And you're then that's the thing is, I think that it's not a qualm I have with it. It's not a negative, but it's it's so, once they get to the palace, it's so over the top exotic of You don't eat bugs? I had bugs for lunch. And, like, suck the bug, like, monkey brains, snakes, and the guy's like, like, taking, taking snakes, whatever.
One more time?
There
we go.
And it was one of those, it was, like, so over the top at dinner, and then it's, like, that feeds a need for showing, like, these Americanized people are not about that life. Got it. They're uncomfortable. Let's go. And then they get there, and Indy's got the plate of fruit, and she's like, I love you so much. Starts eating like crazy because it's like, this is something I like and I can relate with. That's fine. They get to the next spot, and it's just like, again, over the hill, too much like drama, exoticism, whatever you want to call it. And it's like all of that stuff going. It was just like, come on now. But you're right. Like, she's over the top. She's a little too much, where you feel like, in his sense, and maybe it's the fact that in Raiders was first and Miriam was like kind of with it and kind of more of like a tomboy, that it was great. But like, Willie's the fucking opposite, and she's a girl's girl, and she's like holds his gun and like doesn't understand what they're getting shot at. I have a gun, throws it out the window, and like, I broke a nail, and you're like,
it's really
women.
hot.
Yeah, and you're like, women, come on now. Like,
yeah.
So that was my big thing. Is like,
it's kind of just the useless character who can't bother to relate to her scenario, kind of thing. I guess, it's like that. Like as you know, as us as an onlooker, we can look at, you know, the scene as it's come up and be like, yeah, if I was in that situation, all of a sudden, you know, there's this conflict and I need to take an action. Obviously, this is what I'm going to do. And I guess there's maybe that realistic aspect of, you know, with this American woman who's living in Bangkok and maybe has a lot of stuff served to her hand and foot. And that she's a little bit of like pseudo American royalty there. Yeah. Potentially the thought of taking care of anybody else or reacting to any type of situation is logical, I guess, you know, from her perspective. But it doesn't make me any more or any less pissed off at her for her inaction and her inability to respond to the scenario around her. Yeah. But
I don't know how to get on an elephant. I'm gonna ride it backwards for 60 miles.
You dumb bitch.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess she didn't bother me because she does all the things that I hate.
Oh, I hate Willie so goddamn
No. Yeah, she does all the things that I hate, but she also like gets hers a lot. Like, you know, falls off the elephant. Like, has to eat the gross stuff. Like just all the shit happens to her.
Shitty people should lose.
Yeah, like the shitty person loses most of the time here. And she's fun to look at. So
I think I typed out Willie is the worst like 18 times throughout all of my notes.
Well, I'm really rubbing off on you. That's what I say. Is like such and such is the worst. So bad trailer. This one was kind of hard for me because I felt like there was enough. Because usually what we do with the bad trailer, is like, you know, you try to take a part of the movie that you could focus on, make it look completely different, right? And I feel like there was enough of those things in this movie. Because, like, my first thought was like, oh, well, you know, Singer goes on an unfortunate adventure. And it's like, well, more or less, that is kind of what's going on.
Right.
You know, and then I was like, you know, kind of a nuclear father-son, like nuclear family relationship, you know, nuclear family movie, you know, and then it's like, well, yeah, that's just what happened. You know, so I had a little trouble with it. My final answer, I think, I wrote it down. My final answer would be a movie about cuisines of the world. You know, and you're just like, show the dinner scene with the snake surprise, the chilled monkey brains, you know, and then like the little bit they get in the Indian village there. Town. So that was my idea for bad trailer.
Yeah. See, a little bit of the same vibe. So mine kind of went with like the like culture shock or the culture immersion kind of thing of the person who isn't very life experienced. So you
can make it a retreat.
A little bit. So it's like you take Willie, who like knows that she's very like naive to the world
hood.
kind of thing, and you put her in kind of like the out and abounds kind of thing. So it's like she goes through an Indian village, eats some of the cuisine there, ends up at like a palace, kind of eats this like odd food kind of stuff, So it's all a little bit about that like culture shock, putting yourself in an environment you don't understand kind of thing montage. But that's the closest I had. I also really struggled to really understand what I could pull as a bad trailer, kind of out of the scenes here, because there's a lot of, it feels like out of pocket type of stuff that kind of happens throughout this. So I didn't really know how to pull it all together, but that's the closest I could get, was kind of the culture shock of Willie, trying to immerse herself in culture she doesn't understand and world she doesn't understand.
Yeah, that's funny. So mine is a bit of a stretch, but did you guys ever see Heavyweights?
Is that the fat camp thing?
Yeah, camp, Ben Stiller, all that. So mine was Indian summer camp.
Okay.
And it was like the worst Indian summer camp.
The opposite of fat camp? Skinny camp?
Yeah, so it was like kids learn to rough it. Work ethic, diet, respect authority, religion. And you like run through it and you're just like showing all these kids like learning like good motor skills, like breaking rocks and all that kind of stuff. And you're just like, wait a minute, like that, okay, maybe, but like, no.
Yeah. Is that not just manual labor?
Yeah, and you're just like, diet, you mean they didn't feed him? Yeah, but they lost like 60 pounds. Hey-o. And you're like,
I think they call that malnutrition.
Yeah. I don't think this is okay. We shouldn't really, no, it's going to be great. They're going to love it. $200 a month. Like,
it's a bargain.
You're like, send your kids here. And I'm like, oh, Jesus. Okay. All right. Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Great.
My bad summary was Village Rock Goes Missing. Or Village Rock / Pet Rock.
Was that it?
Pet Rock.
Just Village Rock Goes Missing.
Yeah.
It has 3 stripes. Pick the right one.
Yeah.
Well, it's for the 3 layers of the universe.
Oh.
Yeah, they went into it, man. They talked a little
really
bit about it.
Dug deep.
My bad summary was foreign exchange student goes on bizarre field trip.
That's good. Mine, of course, was too long. It says outdoorsy American foreigner ruins religious ceremony while annoying girlfriend and Asian understudy destroys century-old palace, killing a priest and a prime minister.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
There it is. We have a winner. My bad casting was, I said, you have either Arnold Schwarzenegger or Robert De Niro or Leslie Nielsen for Indy. I was just looking at the movies from '84. So there's that. And then I took a page out of your book, Jason, and said Gremlin for short round. Gremlins, so I guess, was 84. And I didn't have anybody for Willie. I probably should have, but yeah.
No, it's all right. So yeah, I kind of struggled with kind of like time period wise substitutes. So if we kind of broaden our horizon there, I would have really loved to see Aubrey Plaza play Willie instead. So instead of somebody who's just bitchy and moany about everything, it's just like sarcasm and disdain about every situation. I think would be really entertaining.
Why would I do that?
Exactly. And then the other way around is just a overreactive Macaulay Culkin, a short round.
Oh, that's nice.
So just a lot of yelling and yeah, 100%.
Andy.
Yeah. But also some of the trap shenanigans, I think, too, also would have come into play and been kind of entertaining.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I had Shatner for Indy. Because it would just be so parceled out for everything. And then I had Martin Short for Short Round. Because he was also, like, big in SNL back then with that stuff. And I was just like, I could just see that. Like, him, like, his charisma as Short Round. And back then it was okay to be, like, not politically correct with a lot of stuff.
Oh, so he does Asian face?
Yeah. Like, instantly Asian
We've all been there.
Yeah, tell me you're not going to laugh. But that was one of those that was just like, like it kind of fits. But I also didn't have a Willie, like, because I looked up, you know, trying to pick out someone else from back in the day. I was like all the top actresses wouldn't make it funny or make it better. They would all do the exact same thing. So I was like, fuck it. Like, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah. Although Scream Queen Jamie Lee Curtis might have worked again for that role, now that I'm thinking about it.
You know what? Yeah. A little bit. A little bit.
but this is bad casting, not good casting.
Right. She could make it work. Not here.
Yeah.
Not today.
So that's not the goal. Yeah. I got 2 plot holes right off the bat here when we're diving into notes. The poison works fast, Dr. Jones, apparently. But, like, it's apparently not too fast because he has time to, like, chase it around the whole ballroom. Like, fall out a window, get in a car, drive down the road a little bit, feel Willie up, grab the antidote, then finally drink it.
I'd say he is pretty fortunate that, number one, he decided that jumping out of a window was the big brain move. And then that number 2, that Willie actually had the antidote on her and that he was able to get it. There's a lot of happenstance calls involved.
Speaking on the antidote thing, interesting that he even trusts it's an antidote.
Yeah.
Because, like, if I'm Lao Che, I'm not bringing the fucking antidote.
Right pocket, fake antidote. Left pocket, real antidote.
I'm not
100%.
Like, you know, what are the
There
chances?
is no antidote. Why would I need a survivor out of this situation?
This is Kool-Aid. Blue Raz?
Like, dude, I'm throwing arsenic in your drink, and I'm not bringing anything for you.
Well, you know what I
mean?
would do, though? What I would do is give them something that gives them enough, like, energy and revitalization to get them into the car that maybe drives them to their hotel room, you know, so they think that they're going to survive, but then die on the way down.
But wait.
Yeah.
That's my approach. You know, the false sense of security to at least get them out of the room and not cause a scene, but still die before they can do anything.
But, like, just classic, like, the dumb villain, like, oh, you can still win.
Yeah.
Like, don't give him a chance to win, you dumb villain. Yeah.
Boom. James Bond connection number 1.
There it is.
I felt so many of these throughout this one. And I know there were some without that are throughout Raiders of the Lost Ark, but so many of them, just even in his attire. Throughout this, so Bond vibes all day.
Can we pause real quick? I need to take this.
Okay.
I know it's not.
I can just go without you.
You do that.
He's got so many comments.
No, we'll just
the camera angle is going to be so focused on him, it won't even matter.
We'll just talk about you while you're gone.
Mike's the worst.
A whole bunch of shit. I might see
So
later.
here's the deal. Like, Michael's barefoot right now, like,
Right.
in my home. You know,
He's
and
got a
that's-
tattoo of Ohio on his, rear calf, and I
Yeah.
think that was his first mistake.
Right. I mean, like, you're just identifying yourself for, you know, like, where you live. You know.
Yeah, Ohio sucks.
Yeah. I mean,
If
we
you've
live
ever
here,
been.
and I like it, but
Well,
you know. Oh, are we keeping it a secret?
Well,
Do you
I
not
mean,
want
no
people to know
longer.
you're in
It's
Ohio?
too late.
Well, I mean, there's editing.
There's that. No, Ohio's okay. It's all right.
You wanna
been
go to
Utah?
Iowa?
I went to Utah one time, right?
Did you like Utah?
Utah was kind of lit. So I went out, I looked at the mountains, and I think about the line from, Lord of the Rings. where
Make
they
sure
talk-
you insult Mike somewhere in this. But go
God,
ahead.
Mike's a bitch. But outside of Mike being a bitch, I don't know. It's really kind of cool to be in Utah in certain places and just kind of look out and about and be in that canyon and see mountains kind of surrounded you on most sides.
Mhm.
Whereas when you're in the state of Ohio, for example, not that that's where we're at, but just in a general example, you look around in Ohio and all you see is just the house that's next to you,
Right.
and that's less exciting.
Unless you go out to the country.
Yeah. But that's the thing. It's just Utah has a landscape. Ohio doesn't have much of a landscape to it. And that was just something that was very awe-strucking to be out of state. And I think to be in, most non-flat states in general, just to be able to kind of see that when you go around, when you're driving around, you feel very small and insignificant, I think, in reference to the rest of the world around you. I think that's
I would say I always feel small and insignificant.
well, and that's just because I think you're a terrible person and you don't really do anything worth value.
Kind of like Mike, who's returned.
I think it is important that we point out that Mike is
Oh my
returned.
god. All right.
Mike, you ever been to Utah?
No.
Very good.
Oh, thank God.
Thank God you can stay.
That was the criteria.
The criteria is we can only have one person on this podcast who's been to Utah, so you wouldn't have been allowed to stay if not.
Oh, thank God I checked that box.
Yeah. So my other plot hole was how and when did Indy make arrangements to leave? Like, especially, like, including Willie in the arrangements to leave. Like,
We only
Was
had
it
3
just
spots is explicitly what was said.
Yeah.
and so then my thought was like, well, maybe it's not a hole. Was it like a mind fuck by Lao Che? Where he calls ahead and he's like, hey, they're gonna get there. Just like tell them, they've made the 3 accommodations, and like Indy's so like brain fried, from the chase. He's just like, yeah, the 3 seats. That's who's with me. I got 3 people. Yeah, okay, let's go.
It seems like he already knows Dan Aykroyd's character,
right?
And with that said, I don't think Dan Aykroyd's character would just be like, oh yeah, these 3 seats from Lao Che. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it was one of those. It was like, it's. I don't know.
Why'd you do it like Doctor? Like these 3 seats from Lao Che.
Lao Che. I don't. But it was one of those. It was like it. Like it seemed like CIA type shit.
Yeah.
Where it was like, hey, Dr. Jones. Hey, it's great to meet you. By the way, I'm this guy, and blah blah blah. And it was like, again, a throw-in for Dan Aykroyd. Like, hey, big comedy guy, SNL at the time, to like get into a movie. To just come out and say like, yeah, Dr. Jones, we have you here. Sorry, it's a cargo plane, but here you are. We're gonna go home. And then again, at that point, what is stopping Lao Che from being like, ha 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 ha? You're like, later, losers.
It's the rule book of villains, though.
Yeah,
you can't just be shot. You have to die elaborately.
The spectacle around like death and anything related to it, like it has to be a marvel. Because if you don't defeat a big protagonist or antagonist, it goes either way. If you don't defeat a protag or an antag in a spectacle, in a meaningful big way, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I need
because
to
no
explain
one
why I'm gonna kill you.
You've seen Die Hard, right?
Yeah.
Just in the title, you die hard. It has to be a marvel.
What do we not do? Die soft.
What are we?
No one would
do?
go see that movie.
What are we gonna do?
It's gonna be like
hard.
a High School Musical esque, like a bunch of just toddlers beating the shit out of each other. No one. I'd go see that, but the average person might not go see that.
A bunch of toddlers hitting shit out of each other.
Oh gosh.
No. My other thing in the beginning scene is just that it seems like everyone just sucks in this industry that Indy's in. Like everyone's just the guy that's like. Because they're like the Lao Che is doing the same thing Belloc did, of just like, go get the thing. Now I'm gonna try to rip you off. You did all the legwork. Now give me the thing.
Yep.
I don't want to do it, and I don't want to pay you. Which like seems like a crazy, unsustainable business plan. Of like, I'm gonna try to kill you every time you go get something for me, and like, but like maybe, maybe he, maybe he's done this before. And he's like, Indy really doesn't like it when I stiff him on the payment. So, like, this was the last thing.
So, the only thing that just sparked in my brain was, like, what if you just gave him, like, someone's urn? And it wasn't, like, the first ruler of the Ming Dynasty or whatever it was. It was just like, those are cigarette butts.
This is Kevin.
Yeah, this is Kevin with a little bit of Pam. Like, what if he was just like, because the guy was like, this is amazing. This is, and like opened it up, kind of looked and was like, first ruler of China. And you were like,
smells like cigarettes.
Yeah,
smells like the Ping Dynasty.
Like, but what if it wasn't? And what if he just said it was?
Right.
Yeah.
He was like, yeah, but I'll pay a diamond this big for something.
I think lying in general has a lot of value for these types of scenarios, right?
Oh.
Because like as long as you can trick the guy across the table for you into thinking that what you gave him is more valuable than what he gave you. That's why we're here. We're here to win. So as long as you can convince the guy across, on the other end of the trade that you're winning, then whatever gets you there.
So he's like, look, Indy, I had to poison you for this one. They're like, I can't give you that diamond. That's so much money.
Indy, I'm not a fucking idiot.
But this time, I swear I'll pay you. I swear I'll pay you. And maybe that's where he got with Belloc. And he was just like, Belloc, like, no more. Like, you rip me off every time. Now Belloc just tries to kill him.
Enough is enough, Belloc.
Yeah.
I'm tired.
I'm tired of this shit.
I don't know. Okay. I'd hog the floor for a while. Jason, what you got?
So, one of my points, I kind of just want to talk about in general. So, like, what truly makes a good side character? So, if we kind of look at the dichotomy between, like, Short Round and kind of what he supplies to the overall narrative, then we look at Willie and how much I hate her and want to hit her with a stick. There's
Let's
Which
start
one?
With short round.
Which
Sure.
one?
So there's drastic differences between the two, right? So like Short Round, he provides kind of this comedic relief. He's this younger, innocent participant, I think, is what we can say in Indy's adventures. He doesn't know enough. So if you think about the intro scene, we get this implication of history involved with like Wu Lao, maybe was his name. But there was that Asian dude who was...
Oh, the waiter guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So, and there was that implication of like...
I didn't
remember,
think
he
about
got shot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the corks were bursting. He got shot. And he's like, Indy, we've been on so many adventures, but like, this is the one I'll go on first. There was a very heavy implication of history that's involved, is that like Indy involves other people in his adventures.
I didn't think about that.
And
That's
kind of
good.
has these points of contact. Yeah. And that's why I think like... Short Round kind of has a meaningfulness, is because the implication is that they already had a history and that we get to experience some of that history between those two characters. And again, that falls off, once we kind of exit this movie. But what truly makes a good side character, as far as the history that's implied, the interactions that we actually get to have, and then as far as what's implied over time, either as far as that character exiting the scene, further movies in the franchise, that kind of thing. Short Round, I think, does a really good job of showing his value and showing what he can participate in a narrative to this movie, but obviously disappears entirely as we move forward. Willie is nothing but annoying as goddamn shit.
But she's a set of tits.
She is,
which is all that matters here. She's not a sidekick.
It's the 80s. She's a set of tits and she's blonde.
She's the love interest. She plays a different role.
But boy, could I not give a shit less. Like,
the love interest can do whatever she wants as long as she's hot.
I hate Willie so goddamn much. It's not even funny.
Ironically, so does Indy.
Honestly.
But he wants to bang her.
Indy only bangs her out of principle, I feel true. Like. But
like, I went through all this, like, if you think I'm not banging you, he like herds her up like cattle, and he's like, get over here.
But overall, you think about your franchise.
Scorpion? Get over here.
Well, he fucking lassoed her, man.
You're right. In the very end.
It's like he was like, "No, I'm getting something out of this." It was like, "Whoa, Indy, hey,
give me some
shit." A little rapey. But yeah, you look across your franchise. You look about the characters that are every movie, every entry, and then you look at the characters that are just for a specific entry. And you look at what they really add to value. Short Round, I feel like, added a lot of value to this narrative overall, kind of as that comedic effect. Indy actually speaks Chinese, so they have a little bit of communication back and forth. And I feel like that's a very small part of what could have made Willie a little bit more meaningful, because Willie also spoke a tiny bit of Chinese, Chinese. Mm-hmm. So it's like, there was some meaningful value there, I think, that could have made that, or like her character, and I think maybe some of that character to character interaction more meaningful. But really, all Willie was a female to be next to Indy, to be used as a thing to have sex with and save, and to be used as kind of like a compatriot to save Indy sometimes.
Bond connection number 2.
Pretty much. Whereas Short Round was like a little bit of a whole ass character. He was a kid, so he does nothing of like true value, but also adds enough like quirkiness and quips to the dialogue and back and forth. It sets enough context. I don't know. I feel like Short Round does so much for this movie, and that Willie, I wish would be dead.
Yeah. So to just ditch Willie off for a second.
Fuck Willie.
So with that said, Short Round, 1,000%. It's comedy.
Oh, Willie's the best. Or not Willie's the best. Willie's the worst. Short Round's
the best. You? Yeah. So
we'll fix it in post.
He pushes the narrative, and he, like, they're in the very end when they're in the mines, he's mimicking Indy doing all those things. So it's like there's a connection there. The other thing is they have that like embracing part where they like kind of like get all teary-eyed and like, I love you. Like,
very familial.
That kind of thing is like it's huge in that aspect when you think of that. Like, yes, he's a sidekick, but he's like a son to him. He mimics him. He's innocent. He's a cute little kid. And it's one of those things that you're looking at and you're just like, yeah, he might be the perfect sidekick in that instance, because he can do no wrong. Everything he does, even if he fucks something up, where he pulls the thing, the brake, and it breaks, and he's just like, "Oh shit, Indy!" Like, and you're like, can't get mad at him because I love him already. Like, it wasn't a fault of his, and like you're never gonna blame him for that.
Wait,
vice versa, Willie, no matter what the fuck she does, you blame her wholeheartedly, and you're like,
Willie.
just in on that girl, like, just nothing, like, just everything she does is just terrible.
Yeah, well, and that's kind of the neat thing, I think, of implied history, right? So, like, if you think about the first Indiana Jones movie, so we have the director of, like, the what was the director of museum was kind
Marcus?
of like the Marcus, was like the guy who was both kind of on, like, the college side as well as, like, the museum side, right? Mm-hmm. That was the only character Indy had, like, history with outside of, like, Marion.
Yes.
Everything else is implied, right? So, and then we go to this movie, and then we have, like, the implied history of Short Round, and then also Hulao or whatever. I think I've called his name a couple of different things this entire time.
The waiter, yeah.
Yeah, the waiter dude.
Let's call him the waiter.
The waiter dude.
Do you think, just to cut you off real quick,
do
you think having Short Round, if they would have been able to change things up and put Short Round or a different sidekick in Raiders, they would have? Because I 1,000% think they would have done it.
So, yes and no, because I feel like in your intro to a franchise, you really need to establish your main character.
Correct.
And a side character takes time away from your main character's character development. So, like, Short Round being the character he is, I think kind of fills in some of those gaps because we already know who Indy is generally as a person and as a character. So, I don't know if it would have been quite as necessary through Raiders.
Well, and I think, too, part of the thing with, like you said, you don't have to get to know Indy. Part of the thing, you already love him, right? Because you met him already. So part of the thing with the sidekick is, like, part of the, like, on-screen chemistry, I feel like, too, with, you know, like a sidekick type character, is you have to know that these characters are already established together, right? Or you have to at least have some foreknowledge on like one of them, you know. So the fact that Short Round is so plug and play in this movie, I think, because you already know Indy, and Short Round is just like, yeah, I'm an Indy fan too. Yeah, I love you, Indy. Yeah, you're doing all this stuff. Yeah, Indy, you're awesome.
You know
so
what?
like,
that's
you don't have to develop Short Round as much because he's number one. He's funny, and he goes, hold on to your potatoes and stuff like that.
Just little
tips. You know what? That's such a good point, though, because kind of as Short Round being almost as like that studio audience from the first movie of like that kid who watched it.
Yeah,
he's like a fan that got to be in it. You know?
A little bit like that. Like, and that's honestly a really good take. Yeah. That's a good take.
That's good. I didn't think about, like, studio audience, like a kid watching and be like, "This is my new hero. I love this guy."
Because you almost resonate more with you almost resonate more with Short Round being like the avid fan of Indy who gets to follow him around rather than
because he's legitimately like saying a lot of like your thoughts. Like when Indy has to drink the blood and then he's under the black sleep, and you know he like smacks Short Round around and Short Round cries. You're like, wait. You smack Short Round?
Why would you hit him?
Yeah, you know, and then he's like crying like, Indy, I love you, Indy. And you're like, yeah, Indy, what you doing, man? Come on. Like, this isn't why I'm a fan.
I barely know this guy, but I'm so empathetic to what his cause is.
Yeah. So, yeah. Totally. All right, yeah, Mike, what you got? You got a note? A discussion point?
The side character thing went on for a bit, I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. I like it.
That was good. We'll have to write that should be an episode too, is like the comedy rubric for grading, and then like rules of a sidekick.
Yeah. What are they supposed to do?
Yeah.
What's a good one? What's a bad one?
Yeah. Anyway.
A couple things. So this sounds really dumb. But the bad guy priest that has like the big red like
Molaram, I think. Molaram,
I think.
Let's call him Mole.
Mole.
Yeah.
All he reminded me of.
Mole. Let's call him Mole.
This
Mole.
might come off a bit racist, but Street Fighter, the guy who stretches. That's all. Anytime I saw his face, that's all I could think about. And it was just like, fuck.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say it wasn't racist till you made the sound.
And it
At
was
this
just one
point,
of those
it
things.
is.
It was just like, oh my god, because it was like so played up in the '80s with this movie, and then like early '90s with the Street Fighter game. That was just like, okay, those guys could kind of be, same one and the same. There was some small things that I saw that like kind of like stuck with me. That was kind of pissed about. So when Willie was the sacrificial lamb at that time, and like she went down, and it was like 3 times or 2 times she went down. She got really close, and it was like she came up and like clothes weren't burnt.
Yeah.
No 3rd-degree burns. They
Number
just
one,
like,
I've never been super close to lava, but like I have to imagine being that close to lava.
I
Like,
do more
it's
than
like-
sweat.
It's like roasted chicken from the
Like,
grocery store. I
even
feel
just
like.
ambient temperature, that shit's got to be like 300 degrees
Yeah.
or something.
Like, you're gonna show
you're not doing
something.
well.
Getting dipped in the oven.
Yeah, and then so I saw that, and it was all it was just she like fainted, and he's got to be like Willie, come on, let's get up, let's do this.
Willie, rocket everywhere.
But it was like that kind of shit. You're like, okay, all right. The other thing that was a drawn similarity from Raiders was he has to fight another giant, which was like the head of like the whipping crew. That again, he doesn't murder. Guy dies from kind of his own escapades, where his like. Again, sounds racist. I think his turban gets caught in the crusher or something,
yeah, I think so.
and he gets like dragged back in, and he like the whole thing with that, and you're just like, oh, so Indy did it again. He beat a giant who he didn't technically kill, so we still love him because he's not a murderer.
Yeah. Well, and that was kind of thing of the generation, right? It's like if you aren't just inherently better than someone, then it's the improvise, adapt, overcome. Over your enemy kind of thing.
Bond
right?
connection number 3.
Yeah.
Yeah,
100%, because Bond was like never better than most of his
If you're not
antagonists.
the biggest or smartest.
But by just sheer odds and plot, you're able to get around it.
Yeah.
Either throw them off a cliff or, let whatever happenstance happen to them. But yeah. It's this one again. I did really feel a little bit closer to some Bond storytelling elements for some reason.
Yeah.
The other points I had were this seemed like Raiders, he had to stay in budget, and Temple, they were like, hey, dude, you killed it last time.
Yeah.
As much money as you want.
Movie 2 always gets budget, man.
So there was like
Unless
still
you're the first
practical-
of a new Bond.
Yeah, that's true.
No,
we don't know if we like you yet or not,
yeah.
so just prove us wrong.
The Connery Moore era was. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I shouldn't even.
There's too much history.
Don't bring that up. That's too much.
There's so much history.
Go
back and listen.
So there was practical effects in this. There was the people. There was the big wide shot scenes. Like I said, that it felt kind of Goonies-esque, where it's, the first shot you see in the dungeon is like 100 kids working, and it's sparks flying,
as it should be.
Steam and thank you. Finally, someone said
Capitalist sweat dream.
yeah. But it's like steam and water and rocks, and it just feels kind of like you're there, and it's immersive, and it visually it's really pretty in that aspect.
It's a good set piece.
Yes.
It puts you there, and it makes you feel
Children working, beautiful. No, I'm sorry.
The children, Minecraft, the children yearn for the mines. But then it flops back to the other part where the priest bangs down the water, and you can tell that it's just a small miniature set where they just dumped water down it and had that, and they just kind of like imposed them running like, oh no, there's water, and you're like, I get it, and that's the best they had at the time, so I'll watch it mentally through the lens of an 80s person, but I understand what it is, and it doesn't look as real, and it doesn't capture me as much because the practical effects are fucking great compared to this. So besides that, again, loved it. As far as an adventure, if you were to write a book about this and it's an adventure novel, it hits all cylinders. It's great. I love it.
We hit the formula with this. Is like
Yes,
adventure novel wise, like we 100% hit the formula on it.
Yeah, exactly. Besides that, I mean, like we already hit on, Willie's kind of the worst as far as damsel in distress. Everything she does just fucking goes against the narrative for what we're trying to accomplish. And then you're right in the end.
She just does nothing, bro. Like,
She doesn't, but it's all about the love interest, and that's why he keeps dragging her along. But you're right, at the end, whip her, hey, doll, like let's give her a kiss. And you're just like, kind of rapey, but whatever. It's the 80s, like, I get it, like, action hero, da-da-da. Like, whatever. But, like, if she was not in the movie, nothing is lost, I don't think. 2% is lost. Like, it's so hard to be like, her not in the movie ruins the movie. You know, like, I'm not going to stand on that pedestal.
Yeah, I guess she's somewhat of the reason they even discovered the temple. You know, because Willie's in that room and there's the entrance to it.
Yeah.
So there's that, but maybe they give Short Round and Indy 2 different rooms if she's not there. I would say worth noting.
Yeah, go ahead.
I wish she was dead.
I would say worth noting that this is where Steven Spielberg met Kate Capshaw, the one that plays Willie, and
then fucking married her.
Yeah, it is his wife to this day, so that's kind of fun. But anyway, what were you gonna say?
No, my general thing is just like I really wish the character would have provided more value as the character being the character rather than just the character as a vessel to move plot points along. Because I don't think a character is only meant to provide plot points, but I think a character is meant to interpret and to be interpreted, by the audience. So I feel like her character neglects the part of being interpreted by the audience as a point of meaningfulness and can only be interpreted as a point to move the plot along. And that's just what the shame is because it felt like they did a really decent enough job of it through Raiders of the Lost Ark.
You know what is, if when they showed up to that village and they were eating, my perspective of her would have been 1,000. It would have turned 180 if she looked at Indy and Indy was like, I'm not really hungry, and she was like, don't disrespect them, and just started eating. And like flip that little thing, and they like maybe
because then it would have been like Indy, like he understands the culture, but he wasn't feeling it at that point. But she picked up at least some context clues, and was like,
and you're
this is meaningful.
So then it's like, okay, she's at least compassionate to these people to know I don't like this and I don't want this, but it's gonna hurt their feelings if I don't do it.
You know what? Compassion is probably the right word. All of that lacked out of her character, and I felt like would have made her more meaningful throughout every interaction with every person she had throughout this movie. She lacked compassion entirely.
She's just selfish.
Yeah.
I feel like by the end she started getting some compassion for Short Round.
I was already done with her by that point.
Well, sure, but I mean, if you remember, Indy's fighting, the behemoth of a man,
dude.
right?
Yeah.
And Short Round's like, no, I gotta save him, and she's like, no,
dude, that was so annoying.
And then she's like,
go save him.
Go help Indy.
Yeah. It was like, I don't know, either like just pick a side and stay there with that one, because it's like, no, he's not gonna do anything. He wasn't gonna do anything in the beginning. It was like, so for you at the end to just give in and be like, yeah, go ahead. It was like,
try.
I don't know about that.
Well, they probably did that for some little bit of comic stuff.
Sure.
In that, because it's like he's getting his ass kicked, and she's like, no, he's got it, he can do it. And then he comes back, and she's like, no, stay. And then he like really gets his ass kicked, and she's like, all right, yeah,
maybe you should help
go.
him.
Yeah. You're like, okay, ha 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 ha, like I get it.
Yeah.
So I understand that and why they did it, but still, overarching, what you're saying is right.
Yeah. So with her, I mean, I think we can all relate to that. Just while we're on the topic of her, I have two things that kind of segue into each other. I think everybody can relate to that scene where you're like, I mean, maybe not, depending on your wives and how they are with time, but like just that, like, why don't you understand urgency right now? I'm saying hurry. Like, what don't you understand? And like, especially like at the biggest stakes there possibly could be, of like they're gonna die, they're literally gonna get crushed and
spike coming
through his hat. He's like, ah. So I feel like everybody can relate there. And then fun thing about the bugs, because she's so grossed out about the bugs, that was her whole her thing she had to hurdle. So they brought in like real bugs, and bugs would just escape just like the snakes in the previous movie.
Bug Wrangler.
They really don't do, I think, well enough job of just keeping the set under control.
Well, because they're
Close your goddamn terrariums.
They were talking about it, and they're like, yeah, so we had about 25% of the bugs we had at the beginning at the end. And they were like, we had to keep bringing in bugs. So they lost 75% of the bugs, and they're all just like
bugs
out
don't live
somewhere.
that long. I don't know if you knew this or not, but like the lifespan as far as like, reproducing and then getting offspring, like a lot of them don't make it that long.
Well, this is also going to sound super dumb and nerdy, but like, do they have natural predators? Because they shot in America for all this, I'm pretty sure. And
I'm sure some of them got
If they brought bugs in from like a different country and they were like, it's for movies, just run it through customs. They're like, hey, there's no natural predators here, we probably shouldn't do that. And they're like, it's fine. And then they lost all of those bugs.
Do you want to see the next Indiana Jones movie or not?
Yeah.
I kind of want to see.
Yeah, but what happened to all those bugs? They're gonna fucking kill all the pigeons. And you're like,
fuck a bug, bro.
Fuck a bug. Yeah. So I don't know. I thought that was funny. Also, what if he breaks his arm, like while he's reaching under to get the hat when they're sliding out of that tomb?
Dude, I thought about that too.
Crunch.
I was like, that would have been like the least ideal scenario, because then you're in like 127 hours kind of thing where you have to like saw off your arm.
Same exact thing in the first movie when he like reaches back in to get the whip.
Yeah.
He just waves like crunch.
But I mean, that's like director staple at that point, right? Isn't that just par for the course?
Pretty sure it happens in Crusade. Yeah. I mean, like, I just thought it'd be funny. Like, I know they'd never go back to breakfast. Like, they kind of pissed everybody off. But like, it'd be funny if there was a breakfast scene the next day, and he's just at breakfast, like no arm. I don't know. That just made me laugh thinking of that. Just like sleeve, like he hasn't had time to get modified clothes.
Was that
obviously.
a good choice?
So he's just got a fucking sleeve hanging down.
Worth it.
He's like, I got my fucking hat, don't I? Yeah. Anyway, I feel like I've talked a lot.
I look cool.
So, how do you feel about the, I guess, like kind of like darker tone and the darker like religious tone that kind of carries throughout some of this movie? Do you think that really provides value to this narrative overall, or do you think this would have been better as kind of like a lighthearted adventure kind of thing? Because I just felt like once we got kind of to Pankot Palace, and once we got into the secret room, like it was just very dark, like evil deity, we must harvest the hearts of the innocent and possess people. It felt very dark.
How do I feel about it? Like, or do you mean like, does it make me feel a certain way? Like,
do you think it fits the narrative well enough, or do you think that we should have kept more of like the classic Indy Jones of just like normal adventure and maybe a little bit of supernatural stuff at the end?
Well, I guess what I would say is that you have, when you're writing one of these stories, obviously they're using their history, right? And then, but they're also going like, well, there has to be some reason. Like if Indiana Jones is just looking for the Lost Ark in the previous movie, and then we just get it. I mean, is it the same movie if the whole thing doesn't happen at the end?
Right.
You
lose that impact because
right.
There's not that like wonder
so
around it.
I guess what I would say is that when you're writing something like that, you have to commit. Like, what is the bigger thing? Yeah. Like, okay, the town rock's gone. Like, okay, that's a pretty boring fucking plot if he's just like, I found the rock. Here's the rock.
And your kids.
And the kid. Yeah, I found the rock and the kids. So what has to happen is, like, you in this universe, like, obviously it's not real, but, like, in this universe, you have to commit to, like, this is real here. This actually, that town rock actually does have some magic,
Yeah.
And so it has to also mean something else, because why the fuck would the Maharaj or no, I'm sorry, what's the cult called? I can't
remember.
The Kigi. I know Muskegee's wrong.
Keep going.
The Maserati.
Anyway.
The Maserati.
The Maseratis
and the BMWs.
Why the hell would they want the town rock if it didn't have any power?
Right.
So it has to have a significance. So when you're writing that plot, it has to hold some sort of significance, actually have some power, and then you just got to fully commit, because otherwise we don't believe this story if we just go like, oh, it's a magical rock and those people want it. Like, you got to really, when you're writing that, you have to really go into the details in order, like, you have to know the things that never even go on screen, like the unwritten rules of the thing. You know, that's the whole thing with, like, people writing subtext, you know, that they give to the characters and everything. Yeah. Like, well, what you don't know, what the audience doesn't know about your character is da-da-da-da-da-da. And, you know, they make... So,
it's like, boy, would that have been useful.
In some cases, yeah. But, like, I don't know. I guess what I'm saying is I think it's totally necessary for the story they're trying to tell, because I think you just have to commit. You can't put your toe in the water and decide it's too cold, you know?
I agree with that, but with that said, I think, again, I'm going to take it from the lens of the 80s, that, like, everything's over the top, everything's exotic. And if I'm a Midwestern person in the 80s going to go watch this movie at a Midwestern cinema, I'm going to watch it and be like, okay, how is India different from us? And that's probably what the filmmakers were thinking of, like, all right, well, they have these different religions, and they believe all these different things. And here's this, they eat these different things, and instead of being like, hey, because the one scene when they're, again, traveling on elephants, and they look up, and out of nowhere, she's like, what are those birds? And they're like, vampire bats. And you're like, oh, you couldn't have just said bats? Like, it's one of those things that's just like...
Vampire bats.
It's a buzzword to make you, like, get into the sense of it's India, it's different, vampire
dangerous.
Bats. Yeah, and it's one of those things. So, like, then the next thing is they show up at, you know, Pancor Palace or whatever it is, and they're like, cool, that palace has not been inhabited for 1,000 years or 100 years, whatever, but yeah, evil's there now. And you're like, okay, well, let's just figure this out. And then they go, and it's like all these exotic things you would never eat in America in the Midwest. And you're like, you know, snakes, eyeball soup, monkey brains, all that shit. And you're like, oh my God. And so the next thing is like, how do we build on that? A fucking religion that pulls the heart out of people and sacrifices for this God because the God wants sacrifices. And you're like, Bob Shabba, Bob Shabba, Bob Shabba, Bob Shabba. And you're like, one of those things like, okay, cool, fucking, what else? And like, I agree with you, like, you can't just dip your fucking toe into the water and be like, too much, let's wrangle it back in. You're going full set. Like, yeah, and so you can't just not do it. And so that's the other thing, like, they looked at and they're like, I think that was kind of a nuance that was like, yes, we're bad guys. We're going to do this. This whole thing is a religious site, and we are digging for the last two. And, hey, when we find these last two, shit's going to get crazy. And they're like, yeah, we have 3, and we're taking dudes' hearts. And you're like, oh, my God, your imagination runs wild. Like, what the fuck are they going to do with 5?
Well, you know, and I guess where some of that oddity comes from is, so if you look at the first movie, all of the, like, supernatural aspects that end up occur when Indy has his eyes closed. Right? So when you kind of look at it in that way, where it's like Indy has his eyes closed, all of the major oddities that occur around are outside of really what his perception is. You know, you can imply as much as you can after, you know, the arc closes and everything, and you know, they open their eyes eventually. Yeah,
but if you cut it at that, what you're saying is the second one.
The second one is almost where it's like we go full send into just the implication that, like, the supernatural or, like, the pseudo-natural is explicit and that it is observable.
You see it.
Because we see that. We see the heart get ripped out of the one dude's chest. We see him be sacrificed. You know, we fully expected that weird, like, kind of statue thing that was in the that ritual room to just, like, come to life, you know, with the 3 stones in the skull and everything. Like, I expected, you know, like a rock Gundam thing to just...
You're like, well, no, that's too much.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Too much? I fully expected that type of thing to happen just because it was more of such a direct and obvious observation of a supernatural phenomenon that we had to lean into the supernatural because of that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Indy's got to see it for himself too.
Right.
Well, he also kind of takes part. He cuts the bridge, and he says, "You worship Kali. You pissed off whoever the other god was, Shiva." And starts saying something, and instantly he's part of the religion or whatever, and they start on fire. And that's the other part of that was
It creates
he
the
jumps
reaction,
into
yeah.
it. Yeah, you're right. I never even thought about that, but yeah, that's absolutely right. The first one, the whole first movie, eyes closed. Second movie, eyes open, and kind of takes part.
It's pretty neat.
Yeah.
It's pretty neat. It's pretty cool.
neat.
It's just funny to watch him like,
Gosh darn it!
even like into Crystal Skull, not to like go into that.
Yeah, no, spoilers. Come on.
But the way he's still kind of like, if you believe that sort of thing, and you're like, just after 3 movies, you're like, bro, how much goofy shit have you seen at this point? Like, how are you not on board?
But Tyler, think about it. He saw Christian, or like I guess really Judaism, kind of like religious effects.
Yeah.
And then we look at the second movie and we see like Indian, religious and belief effects.
Yeah.
So it's like, if you believe that sort of thing, there's a billion and near endless amount of beliefs in religious and superstitions kind of things. So if you believe in that sort of thing says, yeah, 2 of them turned out so far.
Well, I mean, the fucking the shit with the Holy Grail fixed his dad in the Last Crusade.
Everything's real.
So I'm just amazed Indy wouldn't be like
More willing to accept.
not
like,
if
no,
you
that makes
believe
sense.
sort
I
of-
can see it.
Like, just the fact that he's still skeptical of things at this point in his life.
But
Penicillin sounds like bullshit. Dude, you just had the Holy Grail dump on your dad.
But in that same vein, though, I can't help but think that like a man of like science and history and like precision is not centered
good,
around
too.
disbelief around literally everything else.
That's fair.
And I think that's really the only place that it lands is that there is that kind of hesitancy to believe in this when it's like, I'm not the subject matter expert for this type of thing, but the information I do have available to me tells me that this maybe isn't. Yeah, maybe something else was going on. Maybe there were factors around going on that made sense.
He's such
Maybe
a skeptic.
Saturn was in retrograde and that caused a bunch of Nazis to melt.
God.
Could
Could you imagine they were like, well, I'm a double Pisces and a 1/3 Cancer, so.
No!
Yeah. Indy, no!
Indy never stood a chance.
Oh, man.
Hitler was a Pisces.
Was he a Pisces?
I have no idea.
So speaking of the heart shit and everything, which is a couple minutes ago at this point, but that's how I'm segueing, so deal with it.
Take it.
I'm sure it's just plot armor, but why didn't they extract Willie's heart? Like, the dude walks up to her, and then Willie, like, happened to not have this hand shackled, and she just put her hand on her heart, and then, like, he didn't do it. He was just kind of like, oh.
Instead of being like,
just walked away.
hey, slave, over here, grab her hand, lash that.
Or him just do it, and then, I don't, like, it's just so funny, and then it, like, follows through, because they're on the bridge later, and they're, like, up there watching Indy fight with the dude, and he's like, and she's like, Indy, cover your heart.
Yeah.
She's like, it works, cover
And the guy's
Just
like,
because it worked for you.
I'm so, what do I do?
It's like,
'cause
oh,
he's
there's
like,
something in the way.
Yeah.
I don't know. There was a
Well,
left
and he
hand.
started getting there, too. Like, he was, like, in Indy a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just, like, really funny to me. Like,
Indy, no.
like, that's the defense. Like, the black magic is stopped by, like, no.
Yeah.
Dare to
Well,
keep a kid on
there's an odd thought around like magic in pseudonatural things and belief in said magic and pseudonatural things. So it's like if the
guess.
disbelief that like I do not allow you to take my heart also dispels that dude's ability to take Indy's heart. Like I don't want to say that there's not an argument around that, but there's kind of an argument around that.
Yeah. I don't want to be that guy, but I'm going to be that guy.
I don't know why I thought of this, but, like, it's like the garlic thing with vampires, It's like maybe they just hate Italians.
Yeah. It's possible. There could have been a million things involved, but that's the thing that pursued, you know. It could be tomatoes just as equally as garlic, but we just decided garlic was
it. Just smells hair gel. Like, no, not this guy. Oh shit! All right. Let's see here. How do you? This is a question I had. How do you dispose of a voodoo doll? Because you can't destroy it, right? Because whatever happens to the voodoo doll happens to the guy.
That's good.
So, in a general sense, there are rituals to dispel a voodoo doll. So, to make it inert to where the voodoo doll no longer has the attribution to the person that it's trying to, cause harm to.
So, in my brain now, I'm thinking of like a comedy show. Just like, yeah, no, we do that. Just bring all your dolls. Let's do that. And they do like a shitty way of doing it. And like,
he just like taps each shoulder of the doll with a wand. And
well,
just
like you see like
it's
it's like an office set and they're like, yeah, hey, this one's done right. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. And they just throw it out back and it just cuts to a guy like in a office. Just like, hey, Jan, did you? Yeah. You're just like, oh shit, that one wasn't done. Like,
so and
just set all the dolls on fire. There's a guy that just like bursts into flames in an office somewhere. Oh my god!
He's like, Jesus Christ, Kevin, what's wrong?
Right.
Fucking smoke alarms are going off. Just a fire.
What the fuck happened? You just see some like stoner like high school kids like, it's probably done, whatever. Like, what the fuck?
They have to change that accident sign down at the voodoo doll dispelling plant. It's like it's been 0 days without accidentally killing him.
Maybe.
Yeah. So outside of all of that,
yes,
there's also like the pseudo magic and pseudo spiritualism around intent towards an item, right? So if the voodoo doll is intended to cause harm to an individual because the person who created the voodoo doll and created kind of like the context around causing damage to the voodoo doll to inflict harm to an individual, if that connection is lost, so like take the mitochondria, the kid who created the voodoo doll and was like stabbing it and everything, causing pain to Indy. Once Short Round burned him with the torch, and then that kind of like brainwashing, or if you want to call it like that pseudo possession, is eliminated, then that intent is also eliminated, and that's really what gives some of those voodoo dolls like power. So I mean, there's different ways you can kind of look at what the voodoo doll is actually doing as far as a conduit to a connection to the individual.
Yeah.
So if you want to look at it as far as like that intent to harm an individual, as soon as that connection was broken from like Short Round burning the Magikarp to waking him up from that possession to where that voodoo doll is no longer intended to harm Indy, then that voodoo doll no longer harms Indy because the intent is no longer there. That
so what you're saying is we don't know if that kid destroyed the voodoo doll, so maybe it comes back up in the Dial of Destiny.
I mean,
somebody finds the doll.
It could, but it's unlikely.
In the U.S. government warehouse.
That's all I'm saying. I mean, they got in there. The Russians got in there once.
Yeah. Well, the only thing I can think about when he was stabbing that is why didn't he just frisbee it behind Indy and just
I would have thrown it in the lava
crusher or that like into the rock crusher.
But I think suffering is more powerful than just like clean death kind of thing,
Oh yes.
It's as if you look at like your mortal enemy. If you ever had a rival in your life, you wish nothing but the worst upon them. It means nothing if they end up dying. They have to suffer for the rest of their life, not just a couple years. So
yeah, well, that's good. It's funny. So with that said, that kid, again, foreshadowing, where he was like, I can't remember what he said at the dinner scene, but he was like, I've heard those stories. I will never.
But I will never allow those dark rituals to take place here. Yeah.
Instantly when he said it, I was like, bullshit. It's gonna happen.
Well, he had to drink the Kool-Aid,
Yeah. But that's the thing is a lot of that would have been out of his intent.
Yeah.
A lot of out of his control.
As far as the movie like just keeping going, as soon as I said, I was just like, yeah, absolutely not. Like that's foreshadowing to be like the opposite of exactly what you just said, sir.
Yeah. So, the minecart chase.
It was amazing.
Why did I feel the same way about some of the car chases as the minecart chase?
Let me guess.
Like it was fun for a while.
Same concept.
Yeah, it was fun for a while.
it was like 3 times too long.
3 times, I don't know. I definitely did lose interest at some point, but I don't know if it was that quite early on. But at some point, I think I was like, is this really just a car chase scene, but in a minecart?
Yeah.
And then at that point is where I got a little frustrated.
We'll have to analyze chase scenes.
Fucking
too.
Bond.
We'll have to analyze chase scenes too. That's definitely an episode.
Here we go.
So fun fact about Raiders, actually. They had a similar like minecart chase like around, because there was like you saw like road tracks and everything around the dig site.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In Raiders, and so they had like a similar like minecart type chase planned. That was kind of long, but they cut it for length.
Stay in budget.
Guess what fucking discs didn't have deleted scenes was this box set, which I would have liked to see just like the deleted scene of it. And also like Raiders was only, I believe, an hour 55.
Yeah, it was short.
Like I feel like they could have got it in there.
Short.
Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, you kind of look for your like 15-minute marks. So you get your hour 30, hour 45, 2 hour, 2:15. Yeah. So for an hour 55 and change, you got 5 minutes of wiggle. Yeah. But you do lose that as far as like TV presentation because you have to make your TV cuts to accommodate commercials. So an hour 55 also means that it's a 2.5 hour long movie as far as TV and commercial wise is.
But it's also a movie from the 80s. So does that differentiate that? Because like we look at it now and we have like,
if anything, that's even more prominent.
Well, you look at TBS, TNT, and or FX, and it's like Marvel, all that kind of shit, and it's like 3 hours. Or Harry Potter on USA and all that kind of shit, and you're like, it's so long. And then I look at the Indy movies, and it's like, oh, hour 55, that's not that bad.
Yeah. Well, I feel like it's even more prominent then because of that's where you get a lot of viewership because like DVDs and stuff, like tapes didn't come around for a bit. Like,
yeah.
I mean, do you have tapes by the 80s? Is that a thing?
I feel like yes.
VHS tapes?
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're all gonna say yes, but we don't know.
No, I'm pretty confident.
He's got like an VHS? 81 porn VHS at his house. That
I
like,
swear to God,
this
one says 81 August.
Link below.
Yeah.
No, so I don't know.
Wrong.
If anything, that's like even more prominent, right? Because like that's
like
there's your viewership. I don't know, and I don't know. Again, I don't know facts here because I wasn't alive. But like, are you getting more views and are you getting like retro cinema kind of days? Like, are they just like, oh, they're playing fucking Indy again? Like, 4 years later, they're like, oh, they're playing Indy this week down at the theater.
Well, here's the other thought is like
the other trailers and everything.
What was TV like then? When did cable come about? What was, because this is the whole thing I never looked up, but like for a long time in TV, it was like 5 channels.
Yeah.
That's all you, or like 4 channels or 3 channels. That's all you had. And there was, news and sports and whatever else, but they didn't have a movie channel. So that's the other part is like now we like flip channels and it's like I think I texted you. I was like, oh shit. It was like 3 weeks ago. I was like, yeah, dude, Raiders is on. This is crazy. This is, oh my God.
Yeah.
And it was one of those, it was just like, yeah, this is great. I can watch it. I don't have to care. It was before Disney Plus pulled onto it. So it was like, yeah, I don't have to buy it. It's great. And then it was like 2 hours and 45 minutes for an hour and 55-minute show. And you're like you said, like, fuck, dude, commercials. Like, Jesus Christ. There's so many breaks in that. But back in 80, let's say like 83, 84, 2-3 years after, 4 years after it came out, what did that, like, did they show it on TV? Like, we don't know. So maybe it was different then also.
I'm almost gonna like doubt that as far as like an 80s time frame, think you're 80 to the 90s, 90. Mm-hmm. That there would have been much less as far as like TV or like TV movie representation, and that you would have been just encouraged to go and watch a rerun of a movie
in a theater
rather than it being appeared on TV. Because you got to think like licensing also would have been a little bit different around that time period. So as far as like a TV or like a broadcaster having the licensing required
probably would have
to
been cheaper
broadcast
to do it at cinemas.
So you'd release it
Yeah.
for like re-cinema, and that's like why, something like those Bond movies had re-releases, and why those,
Some of those box office numbers are inflated. Yeah.
Yeah. 100%.
I didn't think about that.
We saw a ton of that because there was a good chunk of re-releases,
like
and,
even
and,
up
and
to
rebundles.
Sometimes like late, like pretty recent
Yeah.
re-releases where you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Which is cheating.
Wait a minute.
Is cheating like a lot. Like fucking didn't was it what movie was
Avatar cheated.
Yes, Avatar. Okay.
Because
I couldn't
it
remember
had
who
the
it
number
was.
one spot as far as like biggest box office and
It
bigger total
lost.
grossing.
And
It did
then it
finally lose
re-released.
that,
You're right.
and then it did a theater run to add to that value.
Yeah.
Which, to be fair, I'm pretty sure Endgame like kept it around longer, just so they could
Yeah,
boost it up. So everybody's
but
juicing.
if you think about the longevity, Endgame wins out just because of the inherent initial reaction and kind of like post reaction, I guess, is more meaningful because Avatar obviously has a decade, I think, roughly, of longevity around. It's so.
Has it been that long?
oh,
yeah.
dude, like pretty sure 2009. Is that
Yeah.
right? Okay.
That sounds right.
Oh, I feel
And
so old right now.
Just now, it's
just-
occurred to me that a decade ago was not 2009, but in fact
And
2020.
here we are.
Or 2000.
well, I mean, roughly like more than a decade. Like whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know. Avatar, overrated movie.
Neat, but
We'll
overrated.
get into that later.
Neat, but overrated. We'll talk about it in another episode.
Yeah.
Almost neat, definitely overrated. All right, so I don't have a lot of notes left, just other than like my favorite short round quotes of like "strong wood, strong." Ah! The "hang on, lady, we going for a ride."
Lady, we going for a ride. Yeah, that one.
Just the thing when they're playing cards, because I didn't say them earlier, but it was like, "I'm very small, you cheat very big."
Yeah.
What was the one? So the first thing that got me thinking like, oh, this is an action comedy, is when Short Round is in the car and they're driving and there's the rickshaw in front of them.
Okay, you asked for it.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
he fucking powers through it and then stops and they just keep going.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, okay, it's one of those movies. It's hilarious. Ha ha ha. Let's do this.
Hang on to your potatoes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So much comedic relief. Short Round is dynamite.
I
Where is he
just-
now?
I don't know.
He was just in he was in Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Oh.
And he won an Oscar, I think.
Very good. That was like a very dramatic, emotional kind of movie.
I didn't
right?
watch it, but I heard good things.
Yeah. Let's talk about one of the elephants in the room. Like, some of those kids did not come back to the village, right?
Oh,
like some of those kids are dead bodies, right? So do you think there's kind of the aftermath of Indy coming back and he's got the army of kids that could return to the village, and then there's just Rajit, he didn't make it. I'm sorry.
You know what makes
Yeah.
it worse is when they're in that shot where some of the moms are like, "No, where's my kid?"
Yeah.
And push it away and then embrace is like, "No, where's my kid?" And then they get to the end and there's no kid. And to that point is just like, Rajit, Rajit.
and that's the thing I think that's really interesting to conclusions to these types of movies is consequence. Is that we don't typically see a consequence that's in direct relation to the main character unless it's a side character or a plot relevant character dying or not being able to perform an action kind of thing, right? So you don't look at the world implication as much because for some reason we as a people just don't care about the world in general. We only care about what gets highlighted.
Our slice of the world.
Right.
Yeah.
So
you're
it's
right. Our slice.
when you look at this kind of scene, it was a weird thought for me. So I see this and I see Indy showing up, and then I see the armada of children that run in, and that was the first thought I went to. I was like, the children that don't make it home, is this village still at peace with the rock returned and with some of the children at home? Do we call that good enough? And I just those are the thoughts that are kind of in that darker theme I mentioned earlier, where it's just I don't know if we can call that good enough in a true narrative.
But what choice do you have?
Exactly, because you have to roll credits soon.
Yes.
Well,
but they
not just
also
movie-wise,
Yeah.
but like real-life-wise.
Yeah.
Like,
What do you do? I'm sorry. I couldn't have done it. They were there. They were gone before I got there.
Right.
You know,
You're
there's
absolutely right.
not enough I could have done.
Yeah, but I think at the time in the 80s, they weren't talking about that. And so that's the other thing is like you have to understand that like, hey, all these kids are coming back, everybody's happy, and like
Not
it's
everybody.
it's a wrap up where he like, hey, doll face, and like give me a smooch. And then it's like cut scene. And that's where you're like, yeah, but what about those like 7 families who the moms are still like searching for their kids and they're not there? And you're like, you're absolutely right. Like, oh, that's dark as fuck.
That's the thing, man. Some people get a happy ending, but that doesn't
like-
mean we all do. You know, somebody's still got to lose.
No,
and
you're
if
absolutely
that's
right.
not a perfect metaphor for life.
But like, I don't know. Like, if they're not going to address it, I don't want to think about it. But if we're going to pose that question, like, holy shit. Like,
That's a pretty large gaggle of children to be dead and not come back to this village. And the implication of like, I'm sorry the universe did not respond fast enough. I'm sorry Shiva did not compel Indy to, you know, crash his plane and
Well, like-
come across you fast enough. Like it's just such an unfair thing all the way around. If you look at it from just the context implication, the religious implication, anything you look at to it, people lose.
well, 'cause
And you have to justify it somehow,
You're
and it's not
absolutely
fair
right.
enough.
But it's like, what do you like in that aspect? Like, what happens? You know what I mean? Like, Andy brings all these kids back. Said kids are like running to families, and then it hits that like 10 of those families are like, oh, like, where's
Jim
everybody
Bob!
else? Yeah, like, where's everybody else?
Where are you?
And you're like,
Well, guys,
where do we go from here?
sometimes people lose. Content crisis. Content
you
crisis
just
online
lose.
at yahoo.com.
Hey, by the way, like,
Subscribe. YouTube, Spotify, Apple. Sometimes kids die.
You're just gonna stare into the camera for that one.
I'm sorry.
Blankety blink blink.
It's going to
Sometimes
be the
kids
slowest
die.
pan in, don't you worry.
I was trying to be serious. Hey. Sometimes kids die.
Sarah McLaughlin
Shut
in
up.
the arms of an angel
up.
will be playing in the background. Don't worry.
Yeah, let's just all sing that as we move. Come on. Of course, I don't know the words, so I can't really do it.
Right.
But yeah, thanks. And yeah, kids die. So
I'm pretty sure this one's not gonna.